As I was waiting to interview you, I was looking at your tweets today, actually, about Israel. And it just seemed to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me you'd suddenly decided to take a much more direct and tough position. And you said this: now is the moment for Israel to return to its founding premise. The Jewish state has an absolute right to exist, a divine gift, gifted to a divine nation, charged with a divine purpose. Israel has an absolute, unequivocal right and responsibility to defend itself to the fullest, applying the only language its adversaries understand, the language of force. And what would David Ben-Gurion say? Don't depend on anyone else's fleeting sympathies or permission to do it. If Israel wants to destroy Hamas, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hamas. If Israel wants to destroy Hezbollah, Israel should go ahead and destroy Hezbollah. If Israel and Mossad want to pull off Munich 2.0 and take out every last leader of Hamas, whether they're hiding from Doha to Dresden, and host a red wedding at the Four Seasons in Qatar, they should go ahead and do it. Now, when I read that, I was a bit taken aback, because your rhetoric about Israel, I would say before all this, back in the summer, was not as strident as this.
Well, I mean, this is in the wake of an attack. What I'm saying is the principle is the same. The U.S. should not be involved. But when the U.S. is not involved, I think that's better for the U.S. It's also better for Israel to be able to pursue its own national self-interest.
Here's the question I'm going to ask you. It sounds to me like your support for Israel is they can do what the hell they like.
Yes.
But you want to be president of the United States. And there are many people in America, you know this, who are extremely concerned about the proportionate scale of the Israeli response already. And it's only likely to get a lot worse before anything is resolved here. Is your support for them unconditional? Because it sounds like it is.
My support for their right to national self-existence and self-defense and carrying out whatever the heck they think is appropriate in response to the attack submitted on them? Yes, it is not our job to get involved in this in one direction or another.
Historically, it's been America's position in the world to be leader of the free world, to be almost the world's global policeman. And it sounds to me, if you were to become president, what you're saying is any country can, in interests of its own self-defense, can do what the hell it likes, and you won't condemn it. Is there no limit to that?
Well, look, I think that within the bounds of following international law, right, within the bounds of the legal framework that we all abide by, yes, it's not our job to be the global policeman. And I think there's a lot to what you said there, Piers, that's true. Historically, especially if you look at the last 25, 30, 40 years, that has been the role of the United States, is to try to play this role of global cop. Well, I'm running for president of the United States of America. And my job as the U.S. president is to look after American interests. That's a shift from the neoconservative view. It's a shift from the model of liberal hegemony. And I think part of this is because I come from a different generation that has seen the costs of $6.5 trillion of our national debt attributable to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that did not advance U.S. interests. Thousands upon thousands of innocent lives sacrificed in those two wars alone. Yes, I grew up into a generation where we saw that. I reject that vision. But that means we have to practice what we preach in all directions. That means this is Israel's right to defend itself. They should be unconstrained and unrestrained. The IDF can, I believe, get its own job done. For those who would call for U.S. military involvement, I say no. My view to Iran is you stay out and we stay out, and that's something that'll keep Iran out and we stay out of it as well. But that's a different view also than saying that then I'm somehow going to second guess what decisions Israel makes. No, Israel has a right to national self-defense.
So you don't want to help them?
Not militarily. Diplomatically, I do. We have $3.8 billion in aid that's going to Israel. I don't propose cutting that off. We've made that 10-year commitment for a reason. But I think actually, I'm not sure that that's exactly what Bibi would say. I mean, I would give you what Bibi's address to Congress was in 1996. Let's also call out the unspoken truth here, Piers. One unspoken truth of those carrier groups going to the conflict area. Part of the reason they're there is also to play Big Brother to Israel, to sort of say what Israel can and can't do. So I say go back to David Ben-Gurion's founding vision for Israel. That's what I would tell Bibi.
I get that.
You do what you need to do.
Okay, but I would say to you, the reason actually those carriers have been sent in is because it is absolutely in America's national interest what happens now in this war. Because if things were to escalate, and just before I sat down with you, I saw a statement from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, extremely censorious, demanding an immediate ceasefire, saying that they think this could be a disaster for the region. You've got President Erdogan of Turkey calling Israel overtly war criminals now at a rally in Turkey. This is really escalating fast.
So I think we need to de-escalate it. And I don't think our military presence there helps that.
I'm going to come to how that may or may not transpire. But the idea that this is not relevant or pertinent to America's national interest is for the birds, isn't it?
Well, I'm not saying that it's not relevant or pertinent what's happening in the world. My question is, does our military engagement help our national interest?
The United Nations voted a motion for ceasefire in this war. The United States voted against that motion. The United Kingdom, my country, abstained. Where do you sit on that?
I think the United Nations has outlived its purpose. I personally think that we should have an open conversation about the U.S.'s continued involvement in the UN. I don't think that should be a foregone conclusion.
Really?
So I want to be very clear about where I stand on this as someone running for U.S. president. I'm not running for president of the UN, Secretary General of the UN, whatever it is. I'm not running for president of Israel. I'm running for president of the United States of America. And my prism, and I think that this is going to be the foundation of a future that will lead to greater peace in the United States and I think around the world, is to be very candid that my decisions will be made through one filter. What advances the interests of the United States of America? And I don't believe that it advances the United States of America for us to assume the position of a shadow ICJ, an International Court of Justice, deciding what is or isn't proportionate from our armchair position in Washington, D.C., when we have problems of our own and threats of our own to deal with. And so my view is, again, Piers, this is part of the broken foreign policy establishment in both political parties. Once you've crossed that Rubicon, then yes, you're committed to take stances on each of these questions.
Let me ask you this.
It's not my job to adjudicate this as the U.S. president. There are the injustices in this country to most of the American people.
I mean, that's a massive departure. That would be a massive departure. And NATO?
So NATO, I think, is a different conversation from the UN. I do think that there's a conversation first, a table stakes conversation with NATO, when you have a majority of its members still not meeting its minimum 2%.
But an American president has to have a moral compass too. About whatever's going on anywhere in the world.
Well, I have a moral compass.
My question is this. Right now, there are thousands of children. You're a father, 2 young kids. I'm a father of 4 kids. There are thousands of young children getting killed in Gaza. Innocent Palestinian kids. Half of Gaza are kids. Women being blown to pieces. Houses and whole areas being completely decimated. 1 million Gazans have had to move from the north to the south, out of their homes, which they will not be able to return to in most cases because they've been destroyed, and they're going to be destroyed. And I get that the purpose, that Israel's stated mission purpose, is to get rid of Hamas, and I agree with them. But how they do that, the whole world is watching. And the other parts of the region, including Saudi Arabia, that are on the verge of a new accord with Israel, are now recoiling at what they see as a disproportionate response.
So I disagree with some of that characterization.
My question, a long-winded question, but my question is, on a human level, with the moral compass required by an American president, do you not look at what's happening now in Gaza and slightly recoil at the scale of this and what it may become in the next days, weeks, potentially months? Do you not think,
let me
a responsible American president wouldn't say to Prime Minister Netanyahu, just hang on here?
So if I may, Pearson, I appreciate you providing the backdrop for that question.
And I'm not giving you the answer.
No, I know you're not.
I'm asking you.
Yeah, and I take it as a question.
Yeah.
As a difficult question. It's a difficult answer. My first obligation in the way I've lived my life to this date is to my family, to those 2 sons, those 2 boys we're raising. And then we go concentric circles to my nation. I'm a citizen of this nation, not some nebulous global citizen fighting climate change nebulously somewhere else. I'm a citizen of this nation. If I'm running to lead this nation as commander-in-chief, I do have a moral obligation. This is my moral compass speaking. My moral compass is to the United States of America. And once we have dealt with wage stagnation and a border crisis and the people who are suffering in this country, the people who are suffering for threats, vulnerable to cyber attacks, super EMP attacks, nuclear missile attacks from a Russia-China alliance that poses a great threat to the United States and our citizens today. Once we've dealt with that, then maybe we can get to hunger in the Congo after that. But that's the order we need to go in.
Yeah, but this sounds, if you don't mind me saying, this sounds incredibly isolationist.
It's not isolationist.
But I don't think the #1 superpower in the world can just ignore a moral compass elsewhere in the world, particularly in countries which are your allies.
I'm not saying don't get involved or not. I'm saying the question of whether or not we get involved is decided through one prism, of whether it advances the American interest. And so there may be certain cases in which we do make the determination that that does advance the American interest. I'll give you one right now. Taiwan. If China were to invade Taiwan right now, I think it is the job of the U.S. to affirmatively defend. Why? Because we depend on Taiwan for semiconductors that power our modern way of life.
So you would, if you were president, you'd send troops in to defend Taiwan?
I would defend Taiwan, and I'm not going to telegraph exactly which means. There are many
Why
means
would you defend Taiwan militarily but not Israel?
Well, I think that right now we depend on those little semiconductors for our modern way of life.
just purely
and
financial.
Israel also doesn't need it.
But Israel provides a lot of stuff to America.
Well, here's my point. And this is the whole point, Piers, is it's not some top-down cookie-cutter analogizing. I analyze each situation independently.
Isn't there a core principle?
Israel is able to defend itself right now. And I think Israel will be better able to defend itself if we don't muddy the waters. Taiwan has no chance of defending itself versus China, and it matters to the U.S.
Your red line you said to me was
American interest.
It was if American citizens got attacked.
We will hit you back 10 times harder.
Okay, but American citizens were attacked.
So that's what makes this conflict difficult. Is Israel able to take care of that job? If American targets are hit as American targets, right? Let's say they know they're hitting us on an American base. That's a direct hit on the United States.
But if Americans get killed in Israel,
well, if Americans
or get
Israel,
kidnapped and taken hostage by Hamas,
we need to. Well, right now,
you don't see any imperative.
I would prioritize getting those American hostages out. That is a top priority for me. It is a top priority for me.
But just to clarify, you would send American troops in to get the hostages.
I would not take an option off the table in a limited way to protect Americans.
Right, but you said
to protect
me,
Americans.
But,
and America First includes all Americans.
But you did say earlier that you would not want to send any American military into this situation.
I don't want U.S. military involvement in somebody else's war.
You just said you'd send troops in to get the hostages.
American hostages.
Only the American hostages.
Special forces targeted, but Piers, it is also.
What are you going to do? Go in and say, are you American or Israeli?
You're paying attention to the negotiations, I trust. There are very clear delineations that Hamas has drawn right now for releasing civilian hostages of other nations.
But just to clarify, clarify, Vivek, for this, I mean, you're not seriously suggesting that you would send in American troops down to get hostages.
Special forces or otherwise, or negotiators.
But literally only get American hostages rather than, say, Israeli hostages.
The only condition under which we will have shown up there was because they hold American hostages.
Right, but
if we're there, we're going to do the best deal we can to advance American interests, which includes releasing Israeli hostages.
But I would say there's inconsistency to what you've now been saying about it. Do you think at the moment they are acting in accordance with international law and the Geneva Convention? Because many think they're breaking.
I believe there's no evidence to suggest that they're outside of that in the context of the laws of just engagement, in the context of what Hamas did.
But as the UN boss clumsily put it, this is not a new conflict. This has been going on for a long time.
Is it fair that the Arab people, the descendants of Ishmael, have 20-some-odd countries, yet none of them will take on the Palestinians, even as they nominally stand for them against the
I think that's a very good question.
So I think these are questions that we should elevate in our capacity as citizens and as leaders, diplomatically. And I think this may, hearing you, Piers, this may be actually, we might have a lot more common ground than the last 10 minutes might suggest. There's a role for diplomacy.